Our story begins in a world ravaged and turned to desert, where a young man reflects on his own terrible life. He laments that in this world the weak are destined to have everything stolen by the strong, including their own lives. Suddenly, the bus of criminals he's on is violently attacked by a colossal sandworm erupting from beneath them. Facing certain death inside the creature's maw, he resigns himself to his fate, believing he is dying simply because he was weak. The story flashes back 100 years to explain that a terrifyingly bright beam of light struck the Earth, kickstarting the apocalypse. This cataclysmic light began to devour all life on the planet, fundamentally changing its environment. And so, the once blue cradle of civilization was rapidly transformed into a massive, desolate desert. All that was left for the few remaining humans to do was build their own fortresses. Back in the present, a young man named Xian sits on the bus, bitterly questioning why only the bugs were allowed to survive. His brooding is interrupted by a sharp slap across the face from a hulking, blonde-haired man. With a predatory grin, the man mockingly claims his hand just happened to slip. The bully continues his taunts, sarcastically asking for a name so he can properly apologize. Picking himself up, our protagonist quietly introduces himself as Xian. Hearing he only has one name, the bully and his gang erupt in cruel laughter, mocking his parentage. Xian glares back with silent, simmering rage as the bully calls him a grumpy punk. Changing his tone, the blonde man puts a deceptively friendly arm around him, telling him to relax since everyone on the mining bus is in the same boat. He then reveals that no one on board is an actual miner and demands to know what crime brought Xian here. Knowing everyone here is a criminal, Xian listens as the bully guesses his crime was assault, fraud, or maybe theft. Having reached his breaking point, Xian suddenly lashes out, delivering a powerful punch to the bully's face. The blow sends the much larger man flying down the aisle of the bus, stunning the other passengers. Standing over the dumbfounded bully, Xian tells him that his guesses were all wrong. With cold intensity, he reveals the real reason he's on the bus. His crime was murder. The scene flashes back to the cyberpunk metropolis of Neo Seoul, where Xian's worldview was forged. Only the strong are considered people. He recalls killing a thief who tried to rob him, callously viewing it as just taking out another piece of trash. However, the thief's dying words revealed a fatal miscalculation. His older brother is the infamous Awakener, Lee Jiryong. The mere memory of that name, Lee Jiryong, fills Xian with terror. In this world's harsh hierarchy, if the strong are people, then the superpowered Awakeners are revered as gods. Xian had made a fatal mistake. As a mere rat, he had offended a god. Haunted by rumors that Lee Jiryong was hunting him, he fled onto the first bus he could find, heading to the desolate mines. Back in the present, the bully's voice snaps him out of his traumatic memory, and Bully's eyes begin to glow as he asks with a sinister grin, "You done?" Suddenly, a searing pain rips through Xian's head as he comes to a horrifying realization. The bully slams him, and he is thrown into the bus. The blonde man then admits he's on the run for the same reason, lamenting that Xian crossed the line before they could bond over their shared predicament. Xian is plunged into despair, realizing he ran from one Awakener only to land directly in the lap of another. The bully's power flares to life, confirming Xian's worst fears as the other criminals begin to cheer for the Awakener. His terrible luck was confirmed. His desperate escape had led him straight to another superpowered foe. But just as the beatdown is about to begin, the entire bus is violently rocked by an external force. One of the passengers, bloodied from the crash, furiously yells at the driver, blaming his poor driving. However, the driver is slumped over the wheel, groaning and unresponsive. As the angry passenger approaches the driver's seat, his fury quickly turns to sheer terror. With his final breaths, the driver mumbles a horrifying truth: their destination was never the mines. The passenger stares in blood-soaked disbelief, unable to comprehend the driver's panicked words. In a final, desperate scream, the driver reveals their true, gruesome fate, that they are being consumed by the very desert they were trying to cross. The scene pulls back to reveal the bus being helplessly sucked into the gigantic, tooth-lined maw of a sandworm. Inside the monster's gullet, the bus and its occupants are tossed about in a chaotic, final descent. As he's dragged into the abyss, Xian reflects that his life has always been a repetition of being helplessly consumed. Whether in the garbage heaps of Neo Seoul, facing an Awakener, or now being eaten alive, it was all the same. He muses that in this wretched world, having things taken by the strong is simply the natural order. With tears welling in his eyes, he accepts that this is where he dies. His death here isn't special, it's just the inevitable result of his own weakness. However, he briefly entertains the cliché fantasy of gaining immense power, but quickly dismisses it as a predictable daydream. At death's door, he concludes that such fantasies are nothing more than meaningless ramblings. Yet, as he's being buried alive, his hand twitches with a spark of unknown energy. Suddenly, an incredible power surges through his body, shocking him to his core. He screams in agony as this new force tears through him, triggering a painful and violent transformation. Visions of a ruined world buried in sand begin flashing through his mind. He sees iconic landmarks from the old world, like the Eiffel Tower, lying broken and forgotten in the endless desert. The desolate remains of fallen cities flicker rapidly through his consciousness. Through these visions, he witnesses the grand and terrible scale of the world's destruction firsthand. And as the visions overwhelm him, a fundamental change takes place deep within his soul. His consciousness expands, seeing the entire desert planet as if from space. An entire world of sand in its dormant power is reflected in his eye, coalescing into an awakening. At the very moment of his death, Xion awakens a new power tied to the element that was consuming him, sand, and becomes a sandblaster, his body now a conduit for the desert's immense power. From deep within the sandworm's gut, Xion unleashes an explosive blast of concentrated sand. The incredible force of the attack tears a gaping hole through the monster's body from the inside out. Covered in the creature's innards, he emerges from the carcass, swearing to himself that he will survive. After he comes out of the sandworm's body, with his eyes now glowing with newfound power, Xion's resolve is forged in the desert sun. He stands before the colossal corpse of the sandworm he has slain, his vow to survive echoing in the silence. Now a solitary figure in a vast sea of sand, Xion begins his new life, reborn from the belly of the beast. Fresh from his explosive escape, Xion feels a powerful new energy surging through every cell in his body. Clenching his fist as sand swirls around him, he wonders if this incredible sensation is his awakening. But before he can process it, a monstrous sandworm erupts from the desert floor, lunging straight for him. Facing the beast head-on, he steels himself, ready to test his newfound power. However, a mysterious man appears in a flash, casually swatting our protagonist aside and telling him he's in the way. The stranger's power is so immense that Xion is sent tumbling helplessly through the air. Struggling to his feet, he is completely baffled, wondering who the man is and how he appeared so quickly. His eyes then widen in shock as he realizes the sheer impossible speed the stranger possesses. Looking up, he sees the man standing nonchalantly atop the massive, now-dead sandworm, which has been impaled by a colossal sword. The powerful stranger, Jongyong Biom, comments that it's scary being so high up and decides to come back down. He then lifts his leg and kicks the monster's carcass. And with a final tug, the sandworm's body collapses to the ground. Watching from below, Xion can only stare in utter disbelief, thinking the level of power on display is completely insane. And finally understands the true might of an awakener, even as the mighty swordsman grumbles about his sword getting stuck. Suddenly, a cheerful blue-haired woman named Gazelle appears beside Xion, proudly introducing the swordsman as their captain, Jongyong Biom. As she boasts about the captain's speed, Xion is once again stunned, wondering when she even got there. However, he quickly learns she's an ice user when he feels his arm freezing solid where she's holding on to him. Nearby, the captain dismisses the praise, noting that a sandworm isn't a tough opponent before calling out to Giselle. He then lets out an exasperated sigh, clearly unimpressed with her overly familiar antics with the stranger. With surprising strength, Giselle playfully pulls Xion. She then effortlessly pins him to the ground, landing on top of him with a confident smile. After that, she excitedly announces that it's time to check his grade and ability. However, after a dramatic reveal, her cheerful expression quickly turns to one of pure confusion. She reports to her captain that the boy isn't an awakener, a claim that Xion, in disbelief, immediately calls bullshit. Giselle shouts that he doesn't have a rank insignia, the universal mark of an awakener, while Xion screams in pain from his still frozen arm. The captain argues that it's impossible, insisting there's no way an awakener wouldn't have an insignia. But the group's argument is cut short by their irate driver, who yells at them to hurry up before sunset. Giselle turns to her captain, asking what they should do with their captive, who can only grumble that she nearly ripped his arm off. Captain Jongyong Biom gives the young man a long, scrutinizing look, sizing up the mysterious survivor. Deciding he was probably heading to the mine anyway, the captain orders Giselle to put him in their vehicle. With their new, unwilling passenger aboard, the squad's armored vehicle speeds off across the desert. Inside, the driver continues to berate his captain for running off alone and wasting time as the sun begins to set. Tied up and jostled in the back, Xion ironically finds it to be a surprisingly smooth ride amidst all the yelling. However, he's surprised to find that sand moves and swirls before his eyes, seemingly obeying his will. More sand trickles into the truck, drawn to him as if he were a magnet. Confirming he really has awakened an ability, Xion sits up, puzzling over why the others couldn't see his rank insignia. He examines his arm, recalling that its color seemed a little different from the typical insignia. Then it hits him. His insignia is the exact same color as sand, perfectly camouflaged against his skin in the desert. He then mulls over the fact that an insignia's color directly corresponds to an awakener's ability type, and he knows that magic types like Gazelle have blue insignias, while martial types like the Captain have red ones. And while other types are rumored to exist, a power that manipulates sand is something else entirely. As sand swirls around his bound hands, he realizes he possesses a unique ability that no one has ever heard of before. Although his insignia indicates the lowest F rank, he can feel his ability has boundless potential, as vast as the desert itself. So he resolves to hide his power and endure, biding his time until he can fully master his new gifts. With a surge of ambition, he vows that not just the desert but the entire world will become his personal stage. Upon arrival, he gets his first look at the imposing industrial complex of the monocrystal mine. A red-haired guard immediately barks at him to follow, threatening to tie his mouth shut when Xion points out he's still bound. From a distance, Captain Zhongyong Baeom and Giselle watch as Xion is escorted into the mining facility. Giselle casually suggests his survival was just a coincidence, but her captain insists that something about it feels strange. He stares intently after the boy, stating with certainty that it was not a coincidence. His mind flashes back to the scene with the dead sandworm, trying to pinpoint what's nagging at him. He then remembers it, a peculiar blasted-out hole in the side of the creature's corpse. Regretting that he didn't even ask for the kid's name, the captain feels certain that they will meet again someday. Xion arrives at the monocrystal mine only to discover it's not just a series of tunnels, but a sprawling dystopian city. As a guard cuts his bindings, he marvels at the makeshift city, but is harshly told to shut up and wait. When he questions being left alone, the guard callously abandons him, sarcastically offering a bullet to the head instead of an answer. Brushing off his concerns, the guard confidently dismisses him as powerless and leaves him to fend for himself. Miffed, but finally free, he mutters a curse at the departed guard and sets off to find something to eat in this strange new settlement. His hunger soon leads him to a street vendor's stall, where he politely tries to order some food from the old man running it. Nearby, a propaganda poster ironically proclaims that the miner's labor will brightly illuminate Neo's soul. The old vendor serves him a drink, sardonically asking if the grand-sounding propaganda isn't impressive. He then cynically explains that while magic stones are officially Neo's soul's energy source, the truth is far darker. Confused, Xion asks what the real energy source could possibly be if not the mana crystals they're all here to mine. In response, the old man points a withered finger directly at him, ominously revealing that the true energy source is you. The vendor elaborates on his grim metaphor, calling the miners disposable rats who are easily replaced, making them the perfect fuel for the city. Xion dryly notes the old man's extensive knowledge, to which the vendor simply replies that age brings an interest in everything. He then reveals that he already knows about Xion surviving the sandworm, much to the young man's surprise. The vendor warns him that this place is no safe haven, but Xion dismisses the warning, insisting he only came here to make money. Laughing at his naivety, the vendor offers to show him something interesting to prove his point. However, the interesting sight is nothing more than shelves piled high with old dusty boxes and a storage area. When Xion questions the old man's sanity for showing him trash, the vendor explains that these are items he's collected over the years. With a menacing grin, he reveals the boxes contain the last remnants of fools who came before, foretelling Xion's own bleak future. He then begins a grim story, explaining how newcomers desperately try to avoid going into the dangerous mana crystal mine. To delay the inevitable, they sell off everything they own, even their own bodies. But their efforts are futile, as it's only a temporary fix that ultimately solves nothing. Time and again, whatever little they have slips through their fingers until they all face the same grim fate. In the end, they all give up and allow themselves to be swallowed by the all-consuming mine. The vendor concludes his nihilistic sermon. Unlike normal people, trash like them leaves nothing but more trash behind in death. Clearly provoked, Xion glares back as the old man says he's looking forward to seeing what kind of trash he will become. Unfazed by the lecture, Xion brushes it off and asks for the price of the food, to which the vendor gleefully replies, 10 sol. Outraged at the absurd price, he accuses the vendor of sprinkling gold on the meat, but the old man claims everything, even the skewer, is precious here. Seeing through the scam, Xion smirks and informs the vendor that he simply doesn't have that kind of money. As other people around listen, he states that the price is a ripoff, and he realizes the vendor is trying to take advantage of him because he is new. But when Xion tries to walk away without paying, he's abruptly stopped by the vendor's goons emerging from the crowd. The old man leans in menacingly, asking if he ever questioned how a weak old man could operate so openly in such a lawless place. Suddenly, Zeon finds himself completely surrounded by armed thugs, their shadowy forms and glinting blades closing in. With the trap sprung, the vendor smugly asks his new victim what he plans to do now. In a sudden outburst, Zeon slams his fist on the table, seemingly ready for a confrontation. But instead of fighting, he appears to plead, asking the old man to calm down while insisting the price is absurd and that he has no money, and desperately begs to resolve the situation with words instead of violence. The vendor just smiles, feigning generosity by saying that if he lacks money, they can simply trade for something else. The old man's gaze then fixes on Zeon's pocket, demanding the mana crystal he's carrying as payment instead. Stunned, he realizes with dread that the rumor of him possessing a mana crystal has already spread throughout the entire mine. The vendor greedily demands the crystal, promising to make an exception and appraise it fairly. Internally, Zeon flashes back to the immense danger he faced to protect the precious crystal, his resolve hardening against just handing it over. But just then, he daydreams about being grabbed by a massive thug as he desperately offers store credit as a way out, and the thug slams his head onto the table. After that, the thug orders the vendor to bury him, but Zeon unleashes his sandblaster ability. His attack is devastating. He cuts off the thug's hand. The other thugs are stunned, looking on in abject horror while holding the severed arm of their comrade. His violence escalates as he impales the vendor and all his goons with a devastating storm of sand. The daydream concludes with him, eyes glowing ominously, standing as the sole survivor amidst the bloody carnage. But he is violently shaken back to reality by a large hand on his head, snapping him out of his gruesome fantasy. It's the bald monitor from the bus who asks if he's okay after spacing out, causing Zeon to curse as he realizes the entire bloody encounter was just in his head. A large mana crystal is slapped down on a counter in front of a weary-looking old vendor. Slapping it on the counter, Zeon presents the sizable mana crystal, telling the vendor it's the one he was so desperate for. The old vendor inspects its impressive size with a calculating expression, and offers a paltry 100 soul, causing an enraged Zeon to slam his hand down on the counter and protest that it's worth at least 300. Sneering, the vendor retorts that everything is precious in the mine, and he should be grateful he didn't end up as sandworm food. Zeon internally seethes with rage, knowing he could easily kill the old man but forcing himself to hold back for now. Masking his murderous intent with a sinister grin, he agrees to the price but insists on receiving plenty of change. At this, the vendor sardonically warns him to watch out for thieves, ironically just as a pickpocket is seen in action behind them. With a sly grin, the vendor then gestures to a massive pile of junk, offering him his choice of one item as change, and clarifies that Zeon can pick just one single item from the shelves overflowing with scrap and discarded goods. So, Zeon begins rummaging through the junk pile, muttering his disappointment that it's just a complete dump. Meanwhile, the vendor watches his dogged search with a shrewd expression, privately finding the determined kid amusing. He muses on the boy's stubborn vitality and refusal to accept a loss, a sight he hasn't seen in a long time. After trying on a comical animal mask, Zeon's eyes widen as he spots something else that catches his interest. The vendor casually explains that the item was simply left behind by a passing caravan. Zeon selects an ornate hourglass, deciding it's the best he's going to find in the pile of trash. The vendor scoffs at his choice of a useless item, but Zeon simply brushes off the comment. As he walks away from the stall, he pauses and asks the old man for his name. The vendor proudly shouts his name for all to hear, Klexi. Zeon then commits the name Old Man Klexi to memory, smirking as he vows they will never cross paths again. Yet, as Zeon walks away, Klexi chuckles to himself, cryptically suggesting that they will, in fact, see each other again. Back in the solitude of his quarters, Zeon examines the hourglass, noting that the sand takes about 10 minutes to fall. Sitting on the floor of his bare-bones room, he prepares to test the mysterious object. He takes a deep, meditative breath, centering himself before attempting to use his powers on the hourglass. He then exhales slowly, his gaze sharp and focused. With his eyes glowing with power, he commands the hourglass to move. He stares intently, pouring his will into the object, but nothing happens. Clicking his tongue in frustration, he concludes that the hourglass isn't an item related to his awakening. Still, he ponders the strange sense of familiarity he felt, despite being certain he had never seen the item before. It was a strange feeling of déjà vu, as if the hourglass had been specifically prepared just for him. He remains puzzled by the conflicting feeling that the object was both familiar and completely new to him. His concentration is shattered as the door is violently kicked open by a brutish man demanding to know if he's the new arrival. The man, Manhua, aggressively confronts him, yelling about why he hasn't shown up to the mine yet. Zeon tries to state his name and explain he wasn't told where to go, but is cut off by a swift punch to the face. The force of the blow sends him flying across the small room. The bully follows up with another powerful punch, slamming the defenseless Zeon into the floor. After that, he follows up with multiple kicks, furiously screaming at him for daring to talk back. He then sneers that an unawakened person like him just needs to shut up and take his beating without complaint. Having finished the savage beating, Bach gruffly orders Zeon to get up and follow him. Bruised and battered, Zeon stumbles to his feet to follow his tormentor. With a look of pure hatred, he wipes the blood from his mouth and silently vows to remember Bach Manho's name and kill him. Bach drags him to the dark and ominous entrance of the Sector 3 mine. There, a nervous mine worker greets Bach, who orders him to give the little shit some equipment. As the worker outfits Zeon, Bach explains that equipment and food costs will be deducted from his daily wages, making our protagonist realize he won't be paid at all, and is stunned by the absurdity of the deductions, understanding he's now trapped in a system of indentured servitude. But before he can protest, Bach smashes his new mining helmet with a pickaxe, and mockingly informs Zeon that the cost of the broken helmet will also be deducted from his wages. As a final act of malice, Bach orders the terrified worker to send Zeon to the notoriously dangerous Tunnel 972. The worker's attempt to protest the deadly assignment is quickly silenced by Bach's intimidating rage. As the worker leads a defiant Zeon away, Bach threatens to kill him if he tries to leave before finding a mana crystal. As they descend into the mine, the guide remarks on Zeon's bad luck, telling him he's arrived on the very day the mine bully, Bach Manho, lost everything gambling. Surprised that the desolate mine even has a gambling den, Zeon listens as his guide explains that vices like prostitution and drugs are just as common here as in Neo Seoul. The guide then jokes that business must be booming with idiots like Bach Manho around, earning a wry comment from our protagonist about his boldness. Noticing his uncalloused hands, the miner cryptically states that he probably won't have to worry about getting hurt on this pickaxe duty. He then reveals the grim reason. No one has ever been injured in Tunnel 972, because no one has ever returned from it. Zeon stares into the foreboding darkness of Tunnel 972, his newly assigned workplace. Attempting to stay positive, he says he'll just mine some crystals and be right back, only for the guide to bluntly state, "You won't be coming back," and reveals that over a dozen people have disappeared in this tunnel, 4 of whom he knew personally, with no explanation for their fates. Before leaving him locked inside, the miner offers a sincere apology and his thanks. With a heavy conscience, he thanks Zeon for taking on a task that no one else dared to, essentially sacrificing himself for the others. The reality of his situation sinks in, and Zeon panics, shouting for the miner not to abandon him in what is so clearly a death trap. But it's too late. Abandoned in the darkness, he can only watch in disbelief as the elevator ascends, leaving him completely alone. His fear gives way to explosive rage as he furiously strikes the cave wall, cursing Bach Manho for sending him here over a petty grudge. In his blind fury, the head of his pickaxe snaps clean off the handle and flies into the depths of the tunnel. Horrified, he watches as his only tool disappears into the darkness. Now disarmed and truly alone, he takes in his eerie surroundings, a vast cavern filled with a strange, dark mist. As his anger fades, he becomes aware of an incredibly dense concentration of mana in the air, something only an awakener like himself could perceive. Venturing deeper to find his tool, he notices the mana growing even stronger, realizing it's so potent it would have caused mana overload in an ordinary person by now. Finally, he spots his broken pickaxe head lying on the cavern floor just ahead. Relieved despite the broken handle, he steps forward to retrieve his only hope of mining. But just as he muses about his luck, the ground beneath him erupts into a swirling crimson vortex. Caught completely off guard, he panics as the strange force begins to pull him in. With dawning horror, he realizes the anomaly sucking him down is a portal. His helmet falls from his head. He vanishes into the portal, leaving only the light from his helmet to illuminate the broken pickaxe on the ground. As he falls through the void, his life flashes before his eyes, beginning with the harsh judgment of others. He remembers being abandoned by his parents, wishing for nothing more than a stable life, and recalls being beaten for stealing food, a time when his only wish was to no longer be hungry. A memory of being chased by a violent mob highlights his past of constant struggle. All these painful memories coalesced into one simple desire, to just be able to dream of a better life. But he remembers the terror of being hunted after killing a high-ranking Awakener's brother, and wishing for a life without constant fear. And being cornered by overwhelming power, he yearned for a life where he didn't have to worry about dying at any moment. All of his desperate struggles and simple wishes boil down to a single, ultimate goal, a normal life. Suddenly, he is violently ejected from the portal, landing hard on unfamiliar, scorched ground. Dazed, he slowly pushes himself up, his head pounding as he questions the intense heat and mugginess of his new environment. As he touches the ground, he is shocked to find his hand instantly covered in a thick layer of ash, A sudden, chilling realization washes over him as he pieces together what has happened. He curses, remembering the portal and understanding the grim implication of where it must have led. Lifting his gaze, he's met with the terrifying sight of a vast, fiery, volcanic wasteland. Staring into the hellish landscape, he confirms his worst fear. He's been transported inside a dungeon. Inside the dungeon, a stone falls from the surface. He picks it up to diagnose it. But suddenly, he throws it, screaming that it's too hot, and curses it. The harsh reality sets in. He's trapped in a dungeon, a place that even the formidable Neo's soul prepares for thoroughly. Examining his hand, he recognizes it as volcanic ash, which he likens to scorched sand, and knows he must escape before it destroys his lungs. Deducing that any dungeon with an entrance must also have an exit, our protagonist concludes his best chance is to head for the highest point. His eyes lock onto a distant, fiery mountain peak, his one and only destination. Using a strip of his shirt as a makeshift mask, he decides to make a run for it while no beasts are in sight, knowing the environment itself is lethal. Resolved to take the shortest and most direct route, he prepares to make a mad dash for the mountain. Psyching himself up, he sprints across the fiery landscape, declaring himself a man who simply doesn't know how to quit. After a perilous leap across a chasm, he lands just in the nick of time, breathing a sigh of relief at the close call. But disaster strikes as the very cliff edge he's standing on crumbles beneath his feet. Losing his balance, he desperately reaches out as he begins to fall, and catches the edge of the rock. As he is now secure, he defiantly screams that a bit of lava isn't enough to scare him. Reaching solid ground, just barely missing the deadly lava flow, Zeon pants from exhaustion and the shock of his near-death experience. Overcome with rage at his predicament, he screams a vow to find and kill Manhua, the man responsible for sending him here. Forcing himself to calm down, he realizes getting angry only makes the heat worse and redoubles his commitment to survive. With grim determination, he calculates that he only needs to clear 4 more major jumps to reach his goal. Staring up the treacherous path to the mountain peak, he convinces himself that 4 more leaps are all it will take. Focusing his will, he tells himself to stop thinking and just move forward. And so, he pushes his exhausted body to its limits, refusing to accept that his life will end in such a desolate place. With a final surge of willpower, he leaps into the air, vowing that he won't stop. But mid-jump, a colossal lava beast erupts from below, its massive jaws open wide to swallow him whole. Just as the monster's jaws are about to snap shut, sharp spikes of volcanic ash, seemingly under his control, impale the creature from all sides. The giant lava monster flinches back in pain from the unexpected and powerful assault. Lava-like blood drips from the wound near its eye, a testament to the strange attack. However, our guy is shocked to find the sheer heat of the dungeon is intense enough to melt the volcanic ash he's holding. He has a sudden epiphany. His sand manipulation powers also work on volcanic ash, a discovery that just saved his life. However, as he reaches the ground, the toll of his ordeal causes him to collapse. Lying helpless on the scorched earth, he grimly concludes that the dungeon's environment is far more vicious than its monsters. As his mind goes blank from heatstroke and asphyxiation, he can feel his nasal passages being roasted by the toxic air. His consciousness fades to black as he lies motionless, wondering if this is truly the end. He laments the unfairness of dying so soon after vowing to live, complaining that he hasn't even had a girlfriend yet. As the lava beast approaches, he makes a grim joke, telling a certain old man Yamas that he'll have to settle for a crocodile bag instead of taking him. The gigantic lava creature lunges towards the incapacitated young man, ready to deliver the final blow. All he can do is scream in terror as the monster descends upon him. Then, out of nowhere, a mysterious voice echoes through the dungeon, commenting on his amusing abilities as he prepares to attack the crocodile with spikes of sand. The voice muses that the ability to manipulate sand is truly amusing, a sentiment our protagonist vehemently disagrees with. Suddenly, a cloaked figure plummets from the sky, hurtling directly towards the attacking monster. A close-up reveals the wild, toothy grin of an old man, much to Zeon's surprise. The mysterious old swordsman, wreathed in power, makes a dramatic entrance, falling from the sky and leaving Zeon completely shocked. With a maniacal grin, the mysterious old swordsman descends upon the monster to deliver a devastating blow. Meanwhile, shielding his face, Zeon watches in terror as the cataclysmic attack descends. The swordsman's weapon slams into the monster, creating a massive shockwave that tears the ground asunder. The sheer force of the aftershock throws Zeon violently through the air. Clutching his head in agony, he realizes the shockwave was so powerful it ruptured his eardrums, leaving him deafened. As his hearing slowly returns, he looks around, trying to process the monster's defeat and the sudden appearance of the old geezer who saved him. There, the old swordsman stands triumphantly over the colossal, smoldering corpse of the beast he just annihilated. Struggling to his feet, Zeon realizes this man is on a completely different level from any strong awakener he's ever known. The swordsman's imposing figure confirms his fear. This is an existence of an entirely different magnitude. Taking a heavy step forward, the powerful old man turns his attention to Zeon and bluntly asks, "What is it?" Sensing the boy's confusion, the swordsman clarifies that he's asking for his name. With a condescending smile, the old man demands an answer before he counts to 3. The intimidating countdown begins with 3. The count continues with 2, emphasizing his battle-ready gear. And as the final count of 1 is reflected in his eye, Zeon is frozen with terror. Towering over the boy, the old man declares that time is up, preparing to strike. Just as he's about to act, Zeon quickly stammers that his hearing has returned, earning a moment's reprieve. Unimpressed, the old man's eyes glow red as he menacingly utters a single word, "Die." Zeon panics and pleads for his life, which prompts the old swordsman to mockingly note that he's not a mute dumbass after all. When asked for his name again, he desperately screams it out, "Zeon." The old man immediately insults the name, calling it dumbass, which prompts an indignant Zeon to wonder just who this geezer thinks he is. Just then, in a flash of red light, the old man swings his sword and cuts off the slope before them, making a path and demonstrating his power. After that, he introduces himself with a deafening shout, "Daeodin." Clutching his ringing ears, Zeon angrily asks the newly named Daeodin what he's doing, and confronts the old man, demanding to know why he keeps calling him a dumbass and threatening him. Daeodin simply cuts off his protest by, once again, calling him a dumbass. Ignoring Zeon's frustration, he casually explains that the boy was simply unlucky enough to get caught in the snare. He elaborates that the snare is a rare phenomenon where a dungeon with a mana overload creates a second entrance just to vent the excess. This expulsion of mana, he explains, also acts as a lure, reeling in nearby living creatures that even a normal person would never see in their entire lifetime. After explaining this, he mockingly congratulates him on his foul luck, which causes Zeon to curse Manhua for sending him to the deadly Tunnel 972 in the first place. Having had enough, Zeon finally snaps and yells at Daeodin to stop calling him a dumbass. In response, Daeodin roughly grabs Zeon's head, declaring he'll show him exactly why he's a dumbass and ordering him to channel mana into his eyes. Ignoring the boy's struggles, he commands him to increase the purity of the mana and focus. He then instructs him to perceive the world not with his eyes, but with mana itself. As Zeon focuses, his mana-enhanced vision reveals a massive, previously invisible creature lurking right in front of them. While Zeon chokes in terror at the sight, Daeodin just smirks, confirming that the boy can finally see the true danger, and reveals the colossal monster possesses cloaking abilities, stating that oblivious prey like Zeon typically die without ever knowing what ate them. The horrifying truth dawns on him: a monster of that magnitude was right under his nose and he didn't feel a thing, and realizes that if Daeodin hadn't intervened, this cloaked beast would have devoured him without him ever knowing. The gravity of the situation sinks in as he understands this eccentric old man has now saved his life twice. Staring at his savior, Zeon is completely overwhelmed, wondering about the true depths of Daeodin's power. So he finally asks who Daeodin really is, only for the old man to berate him again, calling him a complete dumbass for asking a question he has already answered. Overwhelmed by the display of power, Zeon demands to know who the old swordsman is and where they've been transported. The old man calmly reveals that they are inside his personal dungeon, which he refers to as his hunting ground. With a taunting grin, he challenges Zeon to use his own eyes and see for himself what kind of being stands before him. As the swordsman unleashes his power, the name Creon materializes on his ornate armor, revealing his identity. Suddenly, Zeon is struck by a wave of intense pressure. Recovering slightly, he looks up in shocked confusion, questioning what the old man is doing to him. Then, in a terrifying twist, Daeodin vanishes, leaving Zeon to face a newly summoned swarm of fiery, winged monsters all by himself. From a distance, the old man's voice echoes, calling him an idiot as the beasts close in, and then issues a brutal ultimatum: if Zeon has any worth, he must find a way to survive this ordeal on his own. The moment the crazy old geezers is gone, the lightning-fast monsters begin their relentless assault. Completely swarmed, he curses the creatures, unable to comprehend their incredible speed. Suddenly, at lightning-fast speed, a monster lunges and slices him on the hand. He realizes he's too slow to even run away, and bizarrely notes that the monsters seem to be focusing their attacks solely on his left side. Just then, he uses his sand magic and attacks. But the monsters deftly dodge his attack. The sheer speed and number of the monsters prove to be too much, and he is brutally overwhelmed. Wounded, he despairs that neither his sand abilities nor his eyes are fast enough to keep up. Cornered and bleeding, he faces the grim reality that if things continue this way, he is going to die. But refusing to be a useless idiot after the old man saved him twice, he desperately searches for a way to fight back. Lost in his thoughts of survival, he is startled by Odin's voice and looks up in a daze. Odin berates him for not answering, while Zeon complains that his ears are still ringing from the old man's earlier show of force. Ignoring the pain, he resolves to find a way to perceive enemies that are simply too fast for his eyes to follow. As Zeon scrambles to think of a plan, Odin's voice booms across the battlefield, once again calling him an idiot. He then declares that he's about to show him exactly why his current way of fighting is foolish. And so, the old swordsman begins a harsh lesson, instructing him to gather and focus mana directly into his eyes. He commands Zeon to stop relying on physical sight and instead learn to see and feel the world through mana itself. Following the instructions, Zeon's perception of the world shifts, allowing him to instinctively dodge the monster's attacks by sensing their energy. The lesson continues as Odin shouts for him to feel the monster's mana and use that sense, not his eyes, to fight. Visualizing the monsters as flowing mana signatures, Zeon learns to anticipate their attacks, countering only when they are closest. As he begins to land hits, our protagonist has a sudden realization about the old man's true intentions. He's stunned, wondering if Odin had orchestrated this entire life-threatening encounter as a brutal training exercise from the very beginning, and turns to see that while he is struggling for his life, Odin is busy fighting a much larger, multi-headed beast. The old man laughs with glee, relishing the challenge and exclaiming that it's been a long time since he's been this fired up. He then unleashes a powerful slash that tears the mouth of the crocodile monster. With a crazed and ecstatic expression, he roars for more of a challenge, clearly enjoying the thrill of battle. After that, he yells, "I said keep them coming." Odin stands over the corpse of a monster, unimpressed, calling the swift end a pities. While another monster appears behind him. With a swift swing of his sword, he cuts off the monster's head before it can even react. Having only just finished his warm-up, he complains that modern dungeons lack the number of monsters they had back in my day. Meanwhile, Zeon, covered in blood and scratches, watches the slaughter in disbelief, admitting the display is so insane he almost feels bad for the monsters. Surveying the field of massive monster corpses, he's left speechless by the old man's absurd level of power. With a flicker of forced optimism, he hopes that since all the monsters are gone, his ordeal is finally over. But his hope is immediately shattered as a tremor runs through the dungeon, making him curse his luck. A massive roar then erupts from the lava, signaling the arrival of something far more dangerous. The sheer shock wave of the roar sends Zeon trembling. He then collapses to the ground, vomiting solely from the force of the sound. As he struggles to recover, Odin calmly identifies the sound as the roar of the boss. Just as a monstrous clawed hand emerges from the lava, he explains that every dungeon has a final boss. And as a massive winged silhouette begins to appear, the old man reveals that this particular boss is the very reason he entered the dungeon. Zeon is horrified, realizing that the creature must be a boss-level monster. Odin, however, grins with manic excitement, welcoming the boss's long-awaited appearance. The dungeon's final boss, a massive crimson drake, rises from the volcano's caldera. Zeon wonders aloud if the beast is a dragon, but Odin corrects him, stating it's unfortunately not, but should be B rank at the very least. Ignoring the casual remark, Zeon focuses on the creature's immense power, recognizing a telltale sign of a high-ranking monster. The crimson drake emerges fully, wreathed in a powerful blue aura that he identifies as a force field. Odin mockingly asks how a cripple like him knows about force fields, to which the boy replies that he's only heard that monsters above B rank possess unique traits. He continues, explaining that force fields are like an awakener's insignia, with a red field indicating martial-type traits. However, he trails off, his eyes fixed on the ice like blue stones as he grasps the terrifying implication. At that moment, the Crimson Drake unleashes massive ice stones toward them. Zeon screams in terror, the realization hitting him, this overpowered boss is a magic-type monster. Yet Odin casually charges forward, meeting the magic-type Drake's attack head-on with his sword and effortlessly cutting the stone. Watching this impossible feat, Zeon realizes that all of his common sense and experience are utterly meaningless here. He concludes that in the face of the old geezer's overwhelming power, even a B-rank magic-type boss is nothing. Just then, Odin attacks the monster with his sword, striking it. In a counterattack, the Crimson Dark raises his claws, but Odin effortlessly parries the attack with his massive sword. Just as he thinks he is free, he is caught by the monster's claw. Now the monster is ready to finish his job. A blue circular blast of energy erupts from his mouth. However, Daoden remains unfazed, and by using his magical power, the blast explodes inside the monster's mouth. With glowing red eyes and a manic grin, he taunts the Crimson Drake, asking if its wound hurts. Just then, he tightens his grip on his sword, promising to personally end the monster's pain, and declares that today will be the day of the Crimson Drake's funeral. Watching the insane battle unfold, Zeon screams internally that today is actually the day of his funeral. He runs for his life, caught in the crossfire as the two crazy bastards clash with devastating force. The sheer force of the battle's shockwaves cause him to struggle on his feet. As the very ground beneath him cracks and shatters, Zeon can't believe this level of destruction is being caused by mere shockwaves. He braces himself against the onslaught, desperately struggling just to survive the collateral damage. Daoden, however, is having the time of his life, laughing maniacally at how much fun the fight is. He even mocks the Crimson Drake, comparing their deadly battle to an amusement park ride. The swordsman and the beast continue their cataclysmic battle, tearing the very dungeon apart. Zeon can only look on in horror as the ground beneath him completely gives way. The floor shatters into pieces, sending him plummeting into a deep chasm. He tumbles uncontrollably into the darkness below. Helpless, he continues his fall, unable to stop his descent. As he falls, he looks up one last time to see the epic battle between Daoden and the Crimson Drake still raging far above. The battle rages on while Daoden manically taunts the mighty Crimson Drake, laughing at its seemingly weak attacks. He continues to mock the beast, declaring it a disgrace to the title of Dungeon Boss for cowering before him. Provoked by the taunts, the Crimson Drake begins to charge a massive ball of destructive energy in its maw. Yet unfazed, the old swordsman simply smirks, impressed that the boss knows such a powerful technique. The Drake then unleashes a devastating beam of energy, tearing through the very air as it hurtles towards its target. After the blast subsides, the Drake looks around for its opponent, only to be taunted from behind. "Are you looking for me?" Before the beast can even react, Daoden appears behind it, his sword Creon already slicing through the air in a deadly arc and impaling the monster's body. And with a single, impossibly fast strike, he cleanly decapitates the massive dungeon boss. Standing over the fallen beast, he reveals that he has been hunting this specific Drake for an entire year. His true purpose was to use the Crimson Drake's powerful heart to temper and strengthen his sword, Creon. With a cold, determined gaze, he delivers the final command to the dying beast, "Now, die." He then plunges his sword directly into the Drake's still glowing heart, beginning the absorption process. Instantly, an explosion of dark energy erupts from the heart as Creon begins to drain its immense power. The sword immediately begins to transform, glowing with an ominous red light as it is reforged by the Drake's essence. A powerful red aura envelops Daoden as the tempering process reaches its climax. Soon after, he proudly holds his newly empowered sword, its blade now crackling with dark crimson energy. With a sinister grin, he speaks directly to his weapon, congratulating it on growing stronger. Watching from a safe distance, Zeon is utterly baffled, concluding that the old man must be completely crazy for talking to his sword. The old swordsman finally turns his attention to Zeon, calling him a clod and expressing surprise that he survived the fight's collateral damage. Zeon retorts that while he survived, he certainly came close to death. A flashback reveals him plummeting into a chasm that opened up during the epic battle. As he fell, he desperately used his powers to save himself. His efforts paid off, and he safely landed on a surface formed by his sand magic. Lying there breathless and exhausted, he can't help but marvel at his own incredible resilience. Back in the present, he explains that the battle's constant shockwaves honed his reflexes, which is how he survived. Daoden calls him a clod again, but seems mildly impressed. Just then, the dungeon begins to collapse, and Daoden grabs Zeon, announcing that they need to leave immediately. Suspicious of this sudden helpfulness, our guy warily asks why he's being held. In response, Daoden simply throws his head back and lets out a wild, booming laugh. Then, without another word, he unceremoniously hurls Zeon into a swirling portal, bidding the clod a quick farewell. As he's violently sucked in, Zeon screams that the old lunatic is even worse than his old tormentor, Manhua. Moments later, he crashes onto familiar desert sand, stunned but alive. A moment later, Daoden is unceremoniously spat out of the portal. When Zeon demands to know where they are, Daoden calmly explains that the rift from a collapsing dungeon serves as an exit. But before Zeon can ask any more questions, Daoden cuts him off, sternly telling the boy to listen up. He then reveals that he needs Zeon's unique sand manipulation ability, but since he deems him uselessly weak, he offers him a choice, and points towards civilization, offering Zeon the chance to return to Neo Sol and resume his normal, comfortable life. The alternative? Xian can follow him and, under his tutelage, become a better Claude than he is now. Stunned by the sudden offer, Xian hesitantly asks how long the training would even take. Odin bluntly admits he has no idea, stating it could take months, years, or even decades. With the terms laid bare, he tells the overwhelmed young man that he must make his choice immediately. Xian is now faced with a life-altering decision: return to the familiar safety he once craved, or risk it all in a gamble with a 99% chance of death. The two stand off in the vast desert, the weight of the future hanging on the old man's final command. Now, choose. With a wild grin, Xian scoffs at the very idea of a choice, having already decided to follow the path of power. He then confronts Odin directly, questioning the old man's sanity for offering such a brutal and dangerous path, and rhetorically asks why anyone would willingly trade a comfortable life for a grueling journey through the scorching desert. Odin simply confirms that this hellish trek is exactly what he's offering, his expression unyielding. With his mind made up, Xian spits on the ground, declaring the discussion over. Turning to walk alongside the old swordsman, he officially accepts the offer, vowing to follow him. He then reveals his core motivation, a deep-seated need for revenge against those who have wronged him, admitting he's currently far too weak to achieve it. With a mischievous grin, he cheekily adds that his new master is also on his future list for payback. Despite his bravado, he acknowledges Odin's immense power, declaring him the strongest person he has ever encountered. When he says he is so certain, his new master challenges that certainty, mocking him by asking if he's merely certain of his own death. Clenching his fist, Xian counters with unwavering conviction, certain that this dangerous path will lead him to become the strongest of all. Odin accepts the boy's resolve with a menacing grin, ominously warning that a day of regret will surely come. And so the training begins, with Odin immediately calling his new student an idiot and ordering him to keep up on their long journey. Almost immediately, the grueling pace of the desert march has Xian gasping for air and begging to slow down. After 6 grueling hours of non-stop walking, an exhausted Xian pleads for a break, yet his master continues on without a word. Frustrated by the silence, he throws a comical tantrum in the middle of the desert, screaming at the old man's apparent moodiness. The intense heat, easily over 50 degrees Celsius, becomes his immediate enemy as he struggles against exhaustion. With every step sinking deep into the sand, he realizes he's on a direct path to heatstroke and dehydration. Odin finally breaks his silence, calling him a complete fool for failing to utilize even a fraction of his power, and bluntly points out the irony, remarking how pathetic it is for a sand manipulator to struggle walking on the very element he controls. Xian yells back in frustration, defending himself by reminding the old man that he only awakened a few days ago. His master, however, remains utterly unimpressed, dismissing the excuse as completely irrelevant. He then desperately points out his F-rank status, contrasting it with Odin's clearly high-rank power. Having heard enough excuses, Odin explodes with rage, grabbing the boy and shouting at him to stop spouting nonsense about ranks, and challenges Xian's mindset, questioning if he believes S-rankers are just born that way, simply blessed. The old man roars that being blessed is no reason to give up, pointing out that from an outsider's perspective, Xian's own rare ability is a blessing in itself. The harsh lecture leaves Xian stunned, forcing him to reconsider his perspective and the nature of his own power. Calming down, Odin tells him to stop whining and start using his head, bluntly stating that intact limbs are useless if his brain is an idiot. The simple but powerful statement, "It's your ability," resonates with the young man, sparking a moment of realization. Odin emphasizes that the path to growth is one he must figure out for himself, as only he can truly understand his own power. As the lesson sinks in, a spark of understanding appears in his eyes. Shoving him away, Odin delivers a final ultimatum: figure it out or die. After that, Xian begins to analyze his power, determining that his 5-meter control radius is limited but should be sufficient for the task. He pinpoints the problem: the soft sand causes his feet to sink, which severely drains his stamina. Then, a light bulb goes off as he theorizes that condensing the sand directly beneath his boots could create a solid surface to walk on. His first attempt is a success, and he joyfully runs across the sand, his feet no longer sinking. However, his celebration is short-lived when he realizes the technique drains his mana far too quickly to be sustainable. He then experiments with reinforcing his legs with mana, which works, but he acknowledges it doesn't actually utilize his unique ability. All the while, Odin watches his student's persistent trial and error with a faint smile, musing on the tireless nature of youth. He sees the boy's ability to fall and get back up without giving up as the true privilege of the youth, and internally assesses Xian's progress, noting that his mana control and power output already surpass his official F rank. After numerous failures, Zeon finally has a breakthrough, exclaiming in triumph as he perfects his new technique. He excitedly runs to his master, proudly explaining how he figured out to only solidify the small patch of sand directly under his feet, conserving mana. Overcome with pride, he gets cocky, taunting his master that he can do the same trick while making a rude gesture. His moment of celebration is cut short by a swift punch to the head from his unimpressed teacher. Standing over the unconscious boy, Dioden delivers his lesson: don't waste unnecessary energy or you'll die. But when he tries to rouse his student, he realizes he hit him too hard and comically panics, screaming for the unconscious Zeon to breathe. Disoriented, Zeon awakens in the desolate desert, having been knocked out by his new master. And his master, Dioden, greets him with his signature tough love, complaining that the boy is wasting his precious time. When Zeon complains about his injuries, the old swordsman simply unceremoniously tosses a piece of tough jerky at him. He stares at the jerky, wondering how he's supposed to eat something as hard as a rock. Ignoring his plight, Dioden orders him to eat while listening to a story from his youth. His master reminisces about a bygone era where protecting the weak was considered a noble act. But he laments that the current world's harsh survival of the fittest mentality is a kind of common sense he can't get used to, even as his student struggles just to eat. Seeing his apprentice still lying on the ground, the old man delivers a blunt ultimatum: get up and live, or lie there and die. Annoyed but compliant, Zeon finally sits up and tosses the uneaten jerky aside in frustration. Yet, as he looks at his master, he begins to grasp a new lesson about survival. He marvels at the old swordsman's immense lifespan, pondering the countless memories and experiences he must have. That's when he notices his master isn't chewing the tough jerky, but is instead using his own saliva to soften it. A crucial desert survival technique. After trying the method himself, he grumbles that his master could have just told him, only now realizing the wisdom behind the harsh lesson. He's beginning to understand the old man's teaching style. Rather than giving him answers, he's showing him how to find them himself. He wryly admits to himself that for all the talk about teaching a man to fish, he's never actually seen a real fish before. As night falls, a hungry Zeon asks for more jerky, only to be harshly told to shut his trap. Exposed to the elements, he soon starts to shiver and sneeze as the frigid desert night sets in. He complains about the freezing temperatures, a harsh reminder of how unforgiving desert climates can be. And his sleepless night is made even worse by his master's strange habit of talking to his sword, a sight he finds utterly insane. The next morning, desperate with thirst, Zeon is shocked to find the old man wringing out his dew-soaked clothes to drink. At this, our guy fumes, initially believing his master had been secretly hoarding water for himself. But he quickly pieces it together, realizing the seemingly random act of sleeping with his clothes spread out was actually a deliberate method to collect morning dew. While licking dew from his hand and muttering petty revenge, he is abruptly interrupted by his master. After correcting him that he's a dumbass, not an idiot, Dioden asks if he can sense the approaching danger. Completely oblivious, Zeon looks around, having no idea what he's talking about. Then, slowly, he begins to feel the ground trembling beneath him. He realizes with dread that the vibrations aren't from just one or two creatures, but a massive horde. And on the horizon, a terrifying sight is revealed. They are completely surrounded by a massive pack of monsters. Dioden calmly identifies the nocturnal threat as a pack of bighorn hyenas caught out at dawn. Then his master taunts him, asking if he thinks he can survive on his own this time, or if he needs to be saved again. But just then, our guy uses his sand magic and attacks one of the monsters, sending it flying. Brimming with a newfound determination to prove himself, Zeon emphatically rejects the offer of help. Standing firm in the face of the horde, he declares that he will figure this out and survive on his own. With his eyes glowing with power, he channels his sandmancy, ready to unleash a powerful attack. He launches a wide-sweeping attack, attempting to hold back the initial wave of charging hyenas. His attack impales several beasts on massive sand spikes, but it's not nearly enough to stop the relentless horde. Just then he screams in desperation as the sheer overwhelming number of enemies becomes clear. Clutching his chest, he understands that at this rate, he'll run out of mana and die long before the hyenas even reach him. It's a crucial realization. Raw power is useless without efficiency and proper mana management. As the beasts close in, he desperately racks his brain for a more mana-efficient way to fight. Deep in thought, however, he fails to notice one of the hyenas has already broken through his defenses and is lunging at him. The monster bites down hard on his arm, and he yells in a mix of pain and fury at the interruption. Staring at the new puncture wound, he grimly jokes about it being a new ventilation hole. But that very phrase, ventilation hole, echoes in his mind, sparking a sudden and brilliant idea. The rest of the hyena pack continues its relentless charge, undeterred by the loss of a few of its members. With a new plan forming, Zeon calmly stands his ground, facing the ravenous beasts head-on. His epiphany is simple yet profound. Instead of creating massive, costly constructs, he just needs to put holes through them. Putting his new theory into practice, he fires small, hyper-concentrated sand bullets that efficiently pierce the hyenas, finally turning the tide of battle. As the battle continues, Zeon revels in his newfound power, laughing maniacally as he realizes that whether he blows a monster's head off or just punches a hole through it, the result is the same, dead. And he recalls his master's crucial lesson: during combat, mana is life, and wasting it through panic will only lead to an early grave. Applying these teachings, he efficiently dispatches the hyenas, using the minimum mana required for a lethal strike to maximize his combat cost efficiency. He assumes that even his powerful master must take down enemies one by one, completely unaware of the monstrous power Daeodon is about to display. Standing amidst the remaining pack, Daeodon declares that he can't let a dog that bites people live, sentencing all of them to death on the spot. He then flashes a terrifying, teeth-baring grin, brimming with sadistic glee as he prepares to annihilate the entire pack. Watching from a safe distance, Zeon panics, realizing his master is about to unleash another devastatingly powerful attack. With a ferocious battle cry, the old man bellows his intent to wipe every last hyena out of existence, and unleashes a single, overwhelming attack that tears a massive fissure through the very ground itself. The shockwave obliterates the hyena pack, and Zeon screams as he's caught in the blast. Stunned by the raw power, he realizes his master is on a completely different level, and is shocked to see him standing right beside the carnage. The aftermath of that single attack is a scene of utter devastation, a massive trench carved into the earth with a large pool of blood where the hyenas once stood. Our guy stares at the impossible destruction, questioning if his master is even human and wondering how such a feat is possible without using a specific skill. Thoroughly terrified, he makes a mental note to watch his mouth around Daeodon, realizing one wrong move could get him killed just as the pack's alpha emerges. Daeodon casually stands over a hyena alpha and taunts it, complaining that its loud barking might burst his eardrums. The alpha hyena growls menacingly, crackling with a powerful lightning-like aura as it prepares to attack. Daeodon is momentarily surprised as the alpha unleashes its power, recognizing it as a B-rank monster with a powerful force field. The beast's force field intensifies, culminating in a massive blast of energy directed straight at him. Thinking his master is in genuine danger, Zeon screams for the old geezer to look out. Yet, with absolute indifference, Daeodon effortlessly catches the massive energy blast with a single hand, stopping it completely. Zeon's brain short-circuits as he tries to process the sight of his master, casually nullifying a B-rank monster's ultimate attack. His master absorbs the alpha's energy, sarcastically thanking it for the nice and tingly's massage that loosened up his stiff shoulders. His massage over, he glares at the alpha with glowing red eyes and coldly sentences it to death. With a single, earth-shattering punch, he completely obliterates the B-rank alpha hyena. Zeon can only laugh, deciding for his own sanity that it's best to stop questioning the impossibly powerful monster that is his master. Later, now wearing a hyena pelt as a cloak, Zeon calls out to Daeodon, who gruffly confirms his student is still alive while holding the alpha's horn. He then explains that the horn of a bighorn hyena is a useful material with a lightning attribute that can be refined into a fine weapon. As part of his next lesson, Daeodon tosses a newly acquired item to Zeon, yelling for him to catch it. Zeon catches a dagger as his master declares an end to free handouts, stating that from now on, Zeon must procure his own food. Teaching him how to survive, Daeodon demonstrates how to butcher the hyenas, warning him that while the muscles are toxic, the flank meat is perfectly safe to eat. As Zeon stares blankly, his master impatiently orders him to hurry up and start butchering before the sun rises. Startled into action, he quickly agrees as both he and his master look out at the vast, sun-scorched desert. Later, their journey continues, with Zeon happily chewing on the hyena jerky he prepared himself. He reflects on his improved situation. Though he's thirsty, he now has a steady supply of food. And he proudly notes that thanks to his new sandwalk skill, traversing the difficult desert terrain is now a breeze. Feeling a bit too confident, he decides to taunt his master, mockingly asking if the old geezer is jealous of how easily he's walking. While he manages to dodge Daeodon's punch, he celebrates too early, and is immediately struck with the sword hilt, sending him face first into the sand. Daeodon stands over his student, sighing that the kid is already acting up just because he learned one shitty skill. Spitting out sand, Zeon complains that his master shoved his face into the ground when he's already dying of thirst. But he abruptly stops his complaining when he senses a sudden change in the air, a distinct feeling of moisture. However, he realizes he isn't imagining things when he sees Daeodon looking intently in the same direction. Just over the next dune, the two weary travelers discover the impossible, a life-saving oasis in the middle of the scorched desert. Zeon's eyes widen in pure joy, ecstatic to see the legendary desert phenomenon he'd only ever heard rumors about. Overcome with relief and excitement, he runs with outstretched arms towards the pristine blue water, shouting about their incredible discovery. Forgetting all caution, he sprints toward the water, ecstatic at the prospect of finally rehydrating after days of thirst. Meanwhile, Daoden watches his student's reckless dash with an expression of pure annoyance. With a final, desperate burst of speed, the young man closes in on the shimmering pool of water. He dives headfirst into the oasis, groaning with relief as the cool water soaks into his parched body. For the first time in what feels like an eternity, he feels a blissful coolness combating the oppressive desert heat. But just as he's about to be overwhelmed by happiness, a strange reflection in his eye catches his attention. Deep in the water, a warm, blinding light mesmerizes him, drawing him deeper into a trance. As he stares into the alluring light, a strange and powerful lethargy begins to take hold of him. Suddenly, his master's furious shout to snap out of it shatters the hypnotic spell. Alerted to the danger, Zeon scrambles to the shore just as his master lands behind him. The truth is then revealed as a colossal, fish-like monster with a glowing lure erupts from the water. The oasis was a trap. Daoden yanks him to safety just in the nick of time as the beast lunges forward. The massive sand angler towers over them, its true size now terrifyingly apparent on the shore. Zeon screams in terror as he's held firmly in his master's protective grip. With his student out of harm's way, Daoden leaps into action, ready to dispatch the monstrous fish. In a display of overwhelming power, he cuts down the massive beast with a single, explosive strike. Zeon can only watch in stunned silence, his face wet with spray as he processes the insane spectacle. As the mist from the attack settles, he sees a beautiful rainbow arching over the monstrous corpse, a sight he's never witnessed before. His master calmly identifies the creature as a sand angler, a monster that uses the glowing lantern on its head to lure in prey. But the lesson isn't over yet, as he delivers a sharp backhand to his careless student, and furiously berates the young man for his complacency, questioning if he's already forgotten every survival lesson he'd been taught. He then roars that overconfident idiots are always the first to die in the unforgiving desert. Thoroughly chastised, Zeon can only meekly agree while his master sighs in exasperation. Pointing at the giant corpse, Daoden assigns him a new, practical lesson: he is to skin the monster. He explains that the C-rank sand angler's skin is soft and elastic, making it the perfect material for crafting a robe. But his student's clueless question, "Do you need a robe?" is met with an exhausted sigh. Exploding with rage, his master clarifies the robe is for Zeon, screaming in disbelief at his student's rapidly declining intelligence. With blood practically spurting from his ears from the sheer volume of the lecture, Zeon quickly apologizes. Calming down slightly, Daoden explains that the sand angler is a monstrous descendant of the fish that once lived on Earth. Since this is Zeon's first time seeing such a creature, his master tells him to get a good look, though he adds that he doesn't actually care if he does. Staring at the fanged monstrosity, the young man comes to the solemn conclusion that fish are absolutely terrifying. Just then he begins the arduous task of skinning the beast, but his dagger can barely scratch its tough hide. Watching him struggle, Daoden mockingly asks if he's just trying to give the dead fish a nice back scratch, much to Zeon's frustration. Realizing brute force won't work, he stands back, admitting the task is tougher than he thought and resolves to try a different approach. Remembering a key lesson, he begins to focus, channeling his mana into the small dagger. By infusing the blade with his power, he enhances its cutting ability, allowing it to slice cleanly through the monster's hide. Showing great resourcefulness, he then carefully whittles down one of the monster's fins into a makeshift needle. And for his final component, he ingeniously carves out tendons from the creature's flesh to use as thread. His eyes sparkle with anticipation as he proudly finishes his handcrafted piece of equipment. Despite his clever methods, however, the result is a total failure, a useless pile of hide that his master dismisses as turning a perfectly good fish into trash. Watching his apprentice's repeated failures, Daoden smirks, thinking to himself that they still have plenty of materials left for another attempt at crafting. Finally, after countless botched attempts, Zeon triumphantly holds up a newly crafted robe, screaming that his work is at last complete. Having failed 8 times, he proudly presents his creation to his master, jokingly welcoming him to the Zeon boutique. But when Daoden simply calls him a dumbass, Zeon instinctively clutches the new robe, defensively yelling that he won't give it up. Ignoring his apprentice's theatrics, Daoden presents the massive, pulsating gallbladder of the sand angler and gives a simple command: "Eat this." Horrified by the grotesque organ, Zeon asks what it is, only for his master to explain that it's a rare medicine he must consume entirely. With a maniacal grin, the old man presents a simple, non-negotiable choice: eat the gallbladder or die. As Daeodin complains about his arm getting tired, Xion reluctantly takes the heavy gallbladder, muttering under his breath that he hopes his master's arm falls off. Staring at the disgusting meal before him, he swallows nervously, bracing himself for the ordeal. But he convinces himself that eating the disgusting medicine, no matter how bitter, is a far better fate than being beaten to death by his master. However, his first bite leaves him completely baffled, as the taste and texture are nothing like he expected. To his utter astonishment, the gallbladder feels like eating a cloud, and he finds that he can't get full no matter how much he consumes. Just as he's marveling at how fast he's eating, Daeodin cuts him off, calling him a dumbass yet again. Daeodin sits calmly by the fire and informs his confused apprentice that it's now time for you to burn to death. Xion looks down in confusion as a strange, fiery energy begins to swirl around his torso, a clear sign the medicine is taking effect. A moment later, he is consumed by unimaginable pain, letting out a raw, guttural scream, and he feels his entire body burning from the inside, as if he'd swallowed a star. With his body and mana spiraling out of control, the agony makes him believe he is truly about to die. Meanwhile, Daeodin watches his apprentice's torment with a complete lack of sympathy, ordering him to simply endure it. As Xion suffers, the old man waxes philosophically about the nature of the oasis, noting that it too will eventually disappear into the quicksand. He continues his musings on the cycle of life, stating that even after the oasis vanishes, new sand anglers will be born again. His moment of profound thought is comically interrupted by Xion's continued screams, cursing the old geezer for his suffering. Writhing in agony, he screams for his master to stop with the crappy sentiments and just save him. Daeodin merely turns, giving his apprentice a completely unconcerned and almost bored look. The excruciating ordeal apparently lasts through the night, with Xion screaming into the darkness while his master simply tells him to shut up so he can sleep. After an unknown amount of time, Xion finally regains consciousness, weak and disoriented. And his first sight upon waking is the terrifying, upside-down face of his master looming over him. Reacting purely on instinct, a startled Xion yells that he scared him. Daeodin casually asks if he slept well, prompting Xion to angrily correct him that he passed out, not slept. When asked how his body feels, Xion pauses, initially believing nothing has changed. However, as he clenches his fist, a surge of power makes him realize his body is completely different. He is stunned by the transformation. His body feels as light as a grain of sand, his muscles are as tough as wire, and his mana surges like a storm. Argai marvels at his sudden growth and demands to know what happened. His master matter-of-factly explains that the power boost is thanks to the sand angler's gallbladder, and elaborates that the organ is a priceless medicine that grants resistance to the desert's harsh elements, making it as valuable to caravans as a mana stone. Shocked by the value of what he consumed, Xion asks why his master would give him something so precious. Daeodin bellows that it's because his apprentice is pathetically weak and needs to be at least somewhat useful to be dragged along on this journey. Xion cheerfully accepts this reasoning, but his vow to become reliable is cut short when the old man tells him to shut up and finish eating the rest of the angler. After they feast on the monster for 4 straight days, Daeodin stands by its skeleton, remarking that it provided more meat than he'd anticipated. With their supplies now fully stocked, he turns to his newly empowered apprentice and asks if he's ready to set off again. Filled with newfound strength and confidence, Xion eagerly shouts his readiness to continue their journey. 2 weeks later, deep in a relentless sandstorm, Xion notes that his Sandmancer abilities make the harsh weather feel like a gentle breeze. He grumbles internally, however, watching his master walk on, completely unaffected by the storm and never needing rest. His frustration grows as he notes his master hasn't said a word in days, leading him to sarcastically wonder if the old geezer is going through menopause. After 2 straight weeks of silent, non-stop walking, his patience finally snaps, and he starts to seriously doubt whether his master even knows the way. But just as he's about to lose his temper, a giant, insect-like monster erupts from the sand, screeching right in his face. Without a moment's hesitation, the now far stronger Xion drives his elbow into the monster, telling it to shut up. Sighing in exasperation about their endless journey, he lets out a slight cough, which is a prelude to a sudden realization. His eyes widen in surprise as he senses something is amiss with the monster he just struck. The insect, though clearly damaged from his attack, is still standing, proving to be far sturdier than he expected. He concludes that trying to simply walk past this obstacle is going to be impossible. A quick scan with his mana sense reveals the grim reality. He is completely surrounded by a swarm of the creatures, and they are dead serious about attacking. Resolving to end things quickly, he gathers his power, sand swirling around him in preparation for a large-scale attack, and gives himself a final bit of motivation. knowing the old geezer will kill him if he's late, and then smacks the ground to begin the battle. In response, the entire horde of giant desert insects screeches and charges forward, swarming him from all sides. Sarcastically complimenting the bugs for coming out to meet him, he prepares to unleash an attack he calls Blaster. Just then, a blast of sand erupts from the ground, engulfing the monsters. After that, our guy remarks that he actually enjoys sandstorms, since they provide him with an infinite supply of ammunition. However, he realizes Odin has vanished and furiously accuses his master of playing dirty by abandoning him. He continues to hurl insults from afar, shouting that his master's lack of camaraderie is why he's still wandering alone at his age. A moment later, he freezes in regret, nervously wondering if his ridiculously loud master somehow heard his insults. But his fear is instantly replaced with shock as his detection skills pick up an overwhelming number of enemies within a 10-meter radius. Normally, always on guard, he can react immediately to any monster that appears nearby. However, the sheer scale of what he detected this time was far beyond a simple monster ambush. His senses registered not just monsters but a presence that exuded sheer, overwhelming terror. But just then, a swarm of ant-like monsters surrounded him again. Horrified, he questions where this massive insectoid army could have possibly come from. He panics, trying to shout a warning to his distant master about the incredible number of enemies. From his vantage point, Odin sits calmly, observing the unfolding chaos with no intention of intervening. Seeing this, Zeon forces himself to calm down, chiding himself for still acting like a child who needs his master's help, and quickly deduces that the old man must have known about the nest, meaning this is another one of his brutal sink-or-swim quests. A manic grin spreads across his face as he declares that whether there are 1,000 or 10,000, bugs are still just bugs. With renewed and slightly unhinged confidence, he unleashes sand spikes upon them. However, one of the monsters dodges his attack and lunges at him, and his bravado immediately vanishes as he is caught by one of them and overwhelmed by sheer numbers, and he screams that he takes back his confident declaration. After that, he furiously yells at the bugs for ganging up on him like cowards. As the horde descends upon him, all he can do is curse his increasingly dire predicament. Suddenly, he unleashes a powerful blast of sand from beneath him, blowing away the insects that had him pinned. He then uses a pillar of sand to launch himself high into the air, desperately trying to create some distance from the swarm. From his new vantage point, he's horrified to discover that the entire desert floor below is a single massive nest. Bloodied but determined, he grits his teeth, resolving to get even higher to better assess the situation. But his brief hope of safety is shattered when an unseen force slams into him from behind. To his absolute horror, he sees the insects join together like a chain and leap to incredible heights, cutting off his only escape route and capturing his leg. In utter disbelief, he realizes that there's simply no way out of this fight. After that, they stretch his leg. He's sent hurtling back toward the ground, slamming directly into it. The brutal impact forces him to cough up blood as he's slammed into the sand. Battered and gasping for air, he pushes himself onto his hands and knees, completely surrounded. He looks up toward the distant cliff where Odin is watching, managing to gasp out his master's nickname. With a defiant, blood-soaked grin, he challenges his master to watch closely as he finds a way to survive this impossible trial. Odin rises, acknowledging that this is precisely the kind of attitude his idiotic apprentice needs to cultivate, and reflects that Zeon's rare ability is a blessing that could have afforded him a comfortable, easy life. However, he knows that if his student had chosen that path, his potential would have ended there, and muses that true power is an awakener's strength, a concept lost on the weak-minded who would covet such an ability. He then recalls Zeon's own words, his desperate wish to become strong and survive at all costs. Watching his student battle the horde, Odin declares that the boy's time surviving as a weakling is over. Now, he must learn to survive as a true awakener. Leaving his student to his fate, he issues a final, silent challenge to see if the boy can truly survive to the very end in this crazy world. Observing the chaos from afar, Odin wonders aloud if the boy has the grit to survive to the very end in this cruel world. He reflects on the worst possible fate, recalling a cataclysmic event from the past. A flashback reveals the tragedy of 100 years ago, an entire city annihilated in an instant by a single devastating ray of light, and explains that for those who lived through it, the memory of watching loved ones die is a trauma etched into their very bones. And so, he concludes that the burden of these vivid, horrific memories is the inescapable fate of all who survive such tragedies. Back in the present, to him, true survival means shouldering that immense sorrow while constantly walking the razor's edge between life and death. Just then, a cornered Zeon gathers his resolve, refusing to be defeated by the overwhelming swarm of insects. With a manic grin, he channels his power and taunts the insects, screaming that they should feel how utterly screwed they are. Pushing his abilities to new heights, he develops a crude but effective new technique, the high-pressure compressed sand missiles. He then unleashes the attack, firing a piercing beam of sand that cuts through the desert air towards the monstrous horde. He then reveals that by packing the missile with gravity, wind power, and all his available energy, he can multiply its destructive force dozens of times over, creating a cataclysmic explosion. Believing he's turned the tide, he screams in exhilaration, declaring the end for the entire swarm, and maniacally roars that their greatest mistake was not killing him before he had the chance to grow stronger. Watching from a safe distance, a smirking Deoden notes that his punk student is getting a little too excited. In the aftermath, he looks toward the destruction and lets out a triumphant roar, completely oblivious to the imminent danger. While shouting for his master to witness his power, he is suddenly seized from behind by an unseen attacker. The shock and excruciating pain register as he gasps, unable to comprehend how he was struck, and he realizes in horror that he has been ambushed by an insect that appeared from thin air, having completely masked its presence. So he quickly rules out high-tier cloaking, which leads him to a far more sinister and terrifying conclusion. The horrifying truth dawns on him: he's been struck with poison. Now he understands why his mana control is faltering. The poison is specifically designed to block his mana vessels. Enraged and rapidly weakening, he screams in fury at being brought down by such a treacherous tactic. Paralyzed by the poison, he is helpless as the insects swarm him and begin dragging him away. As his consciousness fades, the last thing he can do is curse his miserable luck. He awakens in a dark, cavernous space, quickly recognizing it as the insect's nest, the anthill. Wounded and still paralyzed, he can only watch as monstrous larvae begin to slowly crawl towards him. Our guy identifies the grotesque creatures as the insect's young, realizing with dawning horror that he's about to become their next meal. One of the giant larvae sinks its mandibles into his arm, the sound of flesh and bone crunching through the silent nest. Completely paralyzed, he faces the horrifying reality that his body won't move and that he is about to be eaten alive. As blood trickles from his eye, a wave of despair washes over him. He believes his struggles are finally over. With all hope seemingly lost, he resigns himself to a grim and lonely end. Another larva screeches as it moves in to take a bite from the helpless young man. However, a sudden, inexplicable surge of strength allows his hand to clench, crushing the larva against the ground. Staring at his own hand, he begins to laugh, a broken, maniacal sound that fills the terrifying silence of the nest. Fueled by pure rage at his miserable life, he screams that he refuses to die like this, unable to recall even a single good memory. He bellows a final curse at the insects as a strange, immense power begins to radiate from his very core. An uncontrolled surge of energy erupts from him, cracking the ground and shaking the foundations of the entire nest. The raw power explodes outwards, creating a shockwave that obliterates the nearby insects. This immense energy release tears the entire anthill apart from the inside, causing a colossal explosion on the desert surface. In the aftermath, he stands motionless in the center of a massive crater, surrounded by the silence of destruction. In the aftermath of his rage-induced power surge, the poison has vanished from his system. His stamina and mana are overflowing, and he has officially ranked up. Looking at the new glowing lines on his arm, he confirms that he has truly evolved to a higher rank. He reflects on his newfound power, realizing he's on a completely different level than when he was a mere F rank. Despite this significant power-up, his focus narrows as he turns to face his opponent, the Wolf Ant Queen. The formidable C-rank creature stands before him, its nigh impenetrable armor showing not a single scratch from his previous onslaught. The queen unleashes her brute strength, effortlessly smashing through the bedrock and sending him tumbling backward. He marvels at the monster's raw power, shocked that it can smash through solid rock as if it were a simple wall of sand. Despite his best efforts, his sand-based attacks prove utterly ineffective against the queen's hardened carapace. In a moment of furious disbelief, he realizes that even after his evolution, he still can't manage to damage the crazed beast. Realizing his direct attacks are useless, he accepts that he can't win the fight with his current strategy. And now he understands that no matter how much power he pours into his attacks, they won't leave a single mark on the queen's armor. Facing an enemy with seemingly unbreakable armor, our protagonist realizes he must think of a new way to achieve victory. Then, a brilliant yet brutal idea flashes through his mind. If he can't break the armor, he'll simply have to tear it off. Putting his new plan into motion, he manipulates the surrounding sand to envelop and tightly grip the Wolf Ant Queen's body. With a surge of mana, he declares his new strategy aloud, vowing to twist and rip the armor clean off the monster. Unleashing his full power, he creates a powerful sand vortex, attempting to forcefully peel the queen's protective shell away. But in a desperate counterattack, the queen unleashes a piercing psychic scream, catching him completely by surprise. The monster's high-frequency assault rattles him to his core, making him feel as though his brain is about to explode. The world distorts around him as the psychic scream intensifies, threatening to overwhelm him completely. Enraged that the queen had a hidden trump card, he grits his teeth and resolves to push through the mind-shattering pain. With blood streaming from his eyes and ears, he defiantly accepts the challenge, screaming his intent to fight to the bitter end. Committing to an all-or-nothing final clash, he declares that they'll see which one of them dies first. The battlefield becomes a chaotic maelstrom as he pits his sand manipulation against the queen's psychic assault. With a ferocious roar, he pushes his power past its limits, determined that the fight won't end until one of them is dead, putting every last ounce of his strength into his final attack. The immense strain of the battle finally takes its toll, and the strings of his consciousness begin to snap. Victorious but completely drained, he collapses, cursing the weakness of a body that can't contain his power. As he falls into unconsciousness, his final thought is that despite his evolution, his physical vessel is still far too weak. Just as he is about to hit the ground, Daoden appears and catches his student, dryly remarking on how weak he is. Holding the exhausted young man, he casually jokes that the idiot's mouth will get twisted if he sleeps on the cold, hard ground. Xion musters the strength to open his eyes, offering a weak, bloody smile to the old geezers who saved him. Daoden scoffs at his student's insolent claim of letting him have the last hit, but begrudgingly admits the boy isn't completely useless. He even offers some rare praise, acknowledging that while the C-rank queen was much stronger, Xion's refusal to give up earned him the right to live. Grinning through the pain, Xion informs his master that he can't hear a word he's saying, his eardrums are completely ruptured. His master reacts with characteristic amusement to the news before unceremoniously dragging him away. Still dazed and deafened, the young man looks up at his master, confused as to where they are suddenly going. Daoden leads him back to the queen's collapsed nest and effortlessly clears the rubble with a single motion. Beneath the rocks, a mysterious, glowing orb is revealed, immediately capturing his confused attention. Pointing at the bizarre object, he weakly asks his master what it is. Daoden reveals the reward for his student's struggle, the queen ant's egg, which he claims is some strawberry-flavored medicine he's going to feed him. After defeating the wolf ant queen, Xion is bewildered because his master simply writes "medicine" in the sand and tells him to eat it. He stares at the pulsating, orb-like queen ant's egg, warily questioning if the strange object is even edible. Still suffering from ruptured eardrums, he cautiously asks his master if eating the egg will be as painful as consuming the sand angler's gallbladder. With a nonchalant expression, his master warns that he will probably die, but the boy is completely deaf to the ominous prediction. Deciding to trust him despite the uncertainty, Xion resolves to eat the egg, telling himself, "He says it's medicine, so I should eat it." And so, he hesitantly swallows the mysterious egg, bracing himself for whatever comes next. To his utter shock, he discovers the egg is unbelievably delicious, a surprising and welcome sensation after his ordeal. But as he asks for another, his expression shifts, as he is about to suffer the egg's true effects. Suddenly, vicious red spikes erupt from Xion's body, causing him to collapse in agony and confusion. This horrifying phenomenon is known as huanzhong, a term for the excruciating twisting of one's intestines. The truth is, the queen ant's egg is no medicine. It's a lethal poison that forces the consumer's internal organs to violently contort. During the horrifying process of huanzhong, the victim's organs are pierced by thorns from the inside out, leading to certain death. Racked with unimaginable pain, Xion screams at his master, feeling utterly betrayed by the very man he chose to follow. Daoden, however, callously dismisses his student's suffering, telling the boy to get used to it if he wants to survive in this harsh world. In a state of pure agony, the boy can't comprehend how anyone could ever get used to being impaled from the inside out. He coughs violently as the internal spikes grow larger and more numerous, bursting through his back. Bleeding black poison from his mouth, Xion looks down at his hands in despair, believing his life is finally over. He recalls his brief moment of happiness and trust, a stark contrast to his current suffering, and feels betrayed, having thought he'd finally found someone to rely on. As he loses consciousness, he bitterly accepts that he was a fool to trust the old master, and succumbs to the poison's effects. He lies motionless on the ground, his body grotesquely pierced by the black thorns of the huanzhong. Ignoring his seemingly dead apprentice, Daoden turns his attention to the wolf ant queen's carcass, ready to harvest its valuables. He casually rips the mana crystal directly from the heart of the dead monster. Admiring the massive, high-quality mana crystal, he grins, declaring it a jackpot compared to the stones produced in mines. Seeing the value in the monster's remains, the old swordsman decides to loot the entire carcass for future use. With the spoils gathered, he retrieves his massive sentient sword, Creon. In a quiet moment, he speaks to his sword, addressing the powerful weapon as his friend. In a one-sided conversation with the Blade about Zeon's fate, he coldly states that if his student is weak, he dies. That's simply his destiny. Having made his decision, he stands over his unconscious student, ready to leave him to his fate. But just then, Zeon speaks up. You know it too, we don't have much time. To the old master's surprise, Zeon awakens from his near-death state and is greeted with a familiar term of endearment, dumbass. Without a word, Zeon retaliates, unleashing a massive, uncontrolled explosion of sand that signals a dramatic increase in his power. His master nonchalantly brushes himself off, complaining about the disrespectful brat kicking up so much dust, and feigns a look of tired surprise, reacting with a deadpan, "Oh really?" to the boy's show of power. Having survived the lethal poison and gained new strength, Zeon launches a furious barrage of powerful sand projectiles at his master. Watching the attack, the old master remains utterly unimpressed, remarking to himself what a dumbass his student is for taking the display so seriously. But the old geezer remains unfazed as sand spikes are about to hit him. Enraged and feeling betrayed, Zeon demands to know why his master tried to kill him. With his eyes glowing with newfound power, he declares that he will never forgive him. He then manifests his rage into deadly, sharpened sand constructs, ready to strike, and once again unleashes his deadly attack upon his master. However, he is left panting, his ultimate attack completely neutralized. Before he can even ask his question again, Daoden interrupts with a weary sigh, calling him a dumbass for his rash actions. Standing unfazed amidst the wreckage, he lectures his student, attributing his foolishness to the mind-altering components of the queen ant's egg. Zeon is utterly stunned in the silence, realizing his all-out attack didn't even leave a single scratch on his master. Daoden scoffs at the very idea of needing poison to kill someone as weak as him, whom he could eliminate with a simple flick to the forehead. The simple, brutal logic of his master's statement begins to sink in, leaving Zeon speechless. Daoden finally explains the truth. The queen ant's egg is both a lethal poison and a heavenly medicine that purges all impurities from the body, and clarifies that once the impurities are gone, the vacant space is filled with pure mana, a sensation his student must have felt. Clenching his fist, Zeon feels the truth in those words as he realizes his mana has increased 3 or 4 times over. The full weight of his master's intentions, a dangerous gift, not a betrayal, finally hits him. Overcome with relief and shame, Zeon breaks down, tearfully hugging the old man and apologizing for ever doubting him. Visibly uncomfortable, Daoden tries to push him away, but the young man realizes with joy that the medicine also healed his ruptured eardrums. His master continues to complain about a grown man crying, but Zeon clings to him, not yet ready to let go of his gratitude. In a rare moment of introspection, Daoden quietly addresses his sword, acknowledging how much his student suffered. Internally, he admits to himself that the situation was far more dangerous than he let on. Zeon only survived because his own strength pulled him through. However, he confesses to himself that feeding him the egg was a trashy gamble, born from the desperate need for his student to get stronger, and fast. Pushing the sentimentality aside, he declares that it's time for them to continue their journey. Without another word, he hoists a confused Zeon over his shoulder, telling him not to bother with forgiveness. Still reeling from the emotional whiplash, the young man can only ask why he's being carried like luggage again. A manic grin spreads across his master's face as he announces they're short on time and need to hurry. A cold sweat drips down Zeon's face as he realizes with dawning horror what hurry means to his master. With an explosive burst of speed, they burst out of the monster's cave, shattering the ground. He cackles manically while Zeon screams for his life, begging for the high-speed torture to end. All he wants is to travel normally, just for once. But his master has no sympathy, cheerfully blaming their breakneck pace on the 4 days Zeon spent unconscious. In the middle of teasing his student about his weakness, Daoden's expression suddenly turns serious as he spots something on the horizon. Now accustomed to the insanity of the desert, Zeon asks what's wrong, certain that nothing could possibly surprise him anymore. That confidence is immediately shattered as his eyes widen in pure disbelief at the sight before them. Far in the distance, a shape so massive it defies comprehension crests the horizon, looking like a moving mountain. The impossible sight is revealed to be a gargantuan, turtle-like monster of unimaginable scale. Even from nearly 30 kilometers away, the sheer size of the beast is enough to leave him utterly dumbfounded. His master calmly identifies the creature as the mobile fortress, Archelon, and explains that while it's only a B-rank monster, its defensive power surpasses even an A-rank, and powerful individuals tame them for transport. Zeon can't believe that people would ride such a crazy monster, but Daoden simply instructs him to take a good, hard look. With his mouth agape, he stares at the colossal creature as his master's lesson begins to sink in. Daeodin uses the spectacle to broaden his students' horizons, explaining that there are monsters in the world capable of riding such beasts. As the two stand dwarfed by the Archelon, he commands his student to witness the vastness of the world with his own eyes. Suddenly, their lesson is interrupted by the arrival of an unknown third party. A figure crashes down from the sky, landing directly in front of them with a powerful impact. The newcomer is an old man with a monocle, who cheerfully notes that he thought he recognized Daeodin from afar. Peering through his monocle, the man greets Daeodin, remarking that it's been a long time. The mysterious stranger then formally addresses him by a name, Daeodin. Daeodin greets his old acquaintance with a toothy grin, cheerfully mocking Pavilsa for having lost even more teeth since they last met. With a weary sigh, Pavilsa retorts that Daeodin is the truly abnormal one for being so spry, despite being over 100 years old. When asked what brings him to this territory, Pavilsa nonchalantly explains that he's on the run from a scavenger infestation. Daeodin scoffs at the idea of running from mere scavengers, but Pavilsa wisely calls his old friend's retreat a sign of wisdom, not weakness. Confused by their exchange, Xion has a minor crisis, wondering how these two powerful old men can so completely defy the natural order of aging. Dismissing the conversation, Pavilsa signals with a whistle, summoning the colossal mobile fortress Archelon from beneath the sands. Xion can only stare in utter disbelief, thinking the sheer scale of the moving city is completely insane. Just then, Pavilsa tells them it's time to go. Completely intimidated by its sheer scale, Xion nervously follows his master inside. As the Archelon's massive reptilian eye opens to watch them, Xion instinctively knows he'd better stay quiet. Pavilsa eyes the unfamiliar boy with suspicion and asks Daeodin if this is his new subordinate. Daeodin casually lifts the young man by his hood, jokingly telling Pavilsa he was just picking up some trash to help the environment. Pavilsa chuckles, amused by the strange sight of the notoriously solitary swordsman dragging someone around with him, and concludes that this must be a sign of the apocalypse, dramatically declaring that the world is surely coming to an end. As they step into the bustling city built upon the Archelon's back, Xion is left speechless by the impossible sight. He looks around the thriving settlement in a state of shock, wondering what kind of place this could possibly be. His master explains that this is the home of the Moat clan, prompting a curious Xion to ask if they are all blood relatives. With disdain, Daeodin confirms they are all descendants of Pavilsa, calling them a bunch of fools who believe they're the chosen ones, and cynically remarks that despite their pride, the Moat clan is completely dependent on the Archelon for survival. Having overheard the insults, Pavilsa defensively challenges him, asking what he could possibly know about the Moat clan. Daeodin taunts him back, predicting that his clan will be nothing but dead weight abandoned by the Archelon once Pavilsa is gone. Pavilsa decides to table the argument, calmly stating that they can discuss it later. Changing the subject to business, he invites Daeodin to show him the goods he's brought for trade. Daeodin casually opens his hand, summoning a swirling black vortex from his subspace storage. From the vortex, a mountain of priceless monster parts, jewels, and ancient artifacts spills out onto the table. Aghast at the sheer volume of loot, Xion asks how many lives he has taken, to which his master grimly jokes that Xion will be next. Still confused, the young man asks his master if he's a magic type, completely ignorant of the concept of subspace. At this, Daeodin is incredulous that he is traveling with someone so ignorant, calling the boy an idiot. Xion angrily yells back at his master for never explaining anything, earning only a threatening glare in return. Ignoring their bickering, Pavilsa inspects the haul and begrudgingly admits that every piece is a flawless, top-grade item. Tired of the flattery, Daeodin cuts to the chase and asks him to name his price. Pavilsa's joke about paying with mana crystals falls flat when Daeodin's hand inches towards his sword, forcing a hasty retraction. Knowing his old acquaintance has little use for mana crystals, Pavilsa asks what he truly wants in trade. Daeodin takes a calm sip of his drink and states his first demand, a breastplate made from the Wolf Ant Queen's corpse. He then pauses for dramatic effect before revealing the second part of his payment. Finishing his request, he adds that he also wants a subspace item for Xion. Pavilsa questions the request, noting that Daeodin has no need for a breastplate and already possesses his own subspace storage. Daeodin clarifies that the new armor and subspace item are not for him. He then gestures to his apprentice, announcing that this idiot is going to be the one to use them. Pavilsa's eye widens in genuine surprise at this unexpected display of mentorship. He internally muses that for Daeodin to care for someone else, the boy must be particularly useful. With the deal struck, Pavilsa stands and bellows for someone named Kaylee to come forward. Daeodin and Xion watch and wait for the person he has summoned. Xion stares with wide-eyed curiosity, wondering who this Kaylee could be. A young woman outfitted with belts of tools and vials enters the room and asks if her grandpa called. It is Pavilsa's granddaughter, the enchanter Kaylee, making her grand entrance. Zeon is instantly captivated by her, thinking to himself that she's very pretty. Her grandfather gets straight to business, asking if she still possesses the subspace bracelet she made before. Kaylee corrects him, stating she has something better, a gauntlet with a superior enchantment that she has been keeping safe. To her absolute horror, Pavilsa orders her to give that precious, one-of-a-kind gauntlet to this stranger. Odin laughs heartily, recognizing the little girl who has now become an enchanter, causing a flustered Kaylee to greet him. He praises her accomplishments, noting that becoming an enchanter is a rare feat even in the advanced city of Neo Seoul. A nervous Kaylee can only agree as her grandfather gestures for her to get on with her task. Pavilsa then dismisses his granddaughter, telling her to also go instruct a crafter named Noel to make the breastplate. Though clearly annoyed, Kaylee tells Zeon to follow her, and he does so with cheerful enthusiasm. Odin and Pavilsa sit in quiet contemplation after their younger companions have departed. Meanwhile, Kaylee leads Zeon through the sunlit, cobblestone streets of the city atop the Archelon. She stops abruptly and demands to know his relationship with the monster, Odin. Zeon sheepishly explains that he ran into the old geezers by chance and is now essentially his prisoner. At this, she flies into a panic, grabbing him and yelling in disbelief that he's still alive after being dragged around by that man. Seeing her intense reaction, he realizes that she's just like him, another victim of Odin's terrifying presence, and quickly understands that her fear comes from a place of deep trauma, recognizing her PTSD from a past encounter with the swordsman. As she runs off, she warns him to be careful of the monster in human skin, a sentiment he knows all too well. They finally arrive at a large stone door where Kaylee stops, confirming this is their destination. With a shark-toothed grin of pure excitement, she proudly announces that they've arrived at her workshop. She dramatically warns him to prepare himself, as he's about to witness something unlike anything he's ever seen before. And as the workshop doors swing open, Zeon's jaw drops in utter astonishment. He's completely overwhelmed by the sight of countless magical items and masterpieces that she has personally crafted. Just then, she passionately clutches her prized gauntlet, lovingly describing its masterpiece-level construction, subspace storage, and auto-repair function. At the thought of an item that can automatically repair itself, Zeon's eyes light up with pure joy. She goes on to explain its special fire attribute, which allows it to become an unimaginable monster when combined with another fire item. Stunned by its power, he asks if it's really okay for him to take it. She reluctantly confirms that those were her grandfather's orders. After she warns him that he can only insert an item once, he eagerly accepts the magnificent gauntlet. But just as he is about to take it, he finds that she is unwilling to let go of her prized creation. Suddenly, Argai screams and begins a desperate tug-of-war for the gauntlet. She wails that she can't give her precious child to a nobody, while he yells back in frustration. Zeon finally wins the struggle, laughing maniacally that the gauntlet she raised with such care is now his. However, their squabble is abruptly cut short as a violent tremor shakes the entire fortress city to its foundations. Thinking he's the cause, he offers to give the gauntlet back, but she shouts that the shaking isn't about him. Recognizing the pained cry of the Archelon, her face fills with dread as she realizes they are under attack by them. As the shaking intensifies, a panicked Zeon desperately asks who they could possibly be, but she completely ignores him and focuses on the commotion. Back in the main chamber, Odin and Pavilsa sit unperturbed by the violent attack. Pavilsa looks out towards the horizon with a hardened gaze, commenting on their attackers' persistence. Outside, a massive force of mounted desert warriors, the scavenger bastards, launches a full-scale assault on the mobile fortress Archelon. Alarms blare as Kaylee and Zeon react in shock to scavengers suddenly attacking the fortress. She quickly explains that these aren't just any bandits, but an infamous group that's been rapidly expanding their territory, and reveals the attackers are the notorious Black Shark clan, led by a lunatic D-rank awakener, whose core members are all powerful scavengers. With a grimace, she stresses that they're psychos who kill for sport, not just for loot. Confused by the level of fear a single D-rank inspires, he questions her as they race towards the command center. Bursting into the control room, she screams in panic, desperately searching for her grandfather Pavilsa. They find Pavilsa and Odin completely unfazed by the chaos, as Pavilsa casually remarks that he saw the attackers arrive. Her frantic suggestion to move the Archelon is quickly shut down by Pavilsa, who knows escape is futile. With grim determination, her grandfather clenches his fists and declares that their only option is to stand and fight. Just as Kaylee moves to rally the fortress's combat personnel, Odin sharply vetoes her plan. He nonchalantly takes a drink, informing the room that he and Zeon will handle the entire attack themselves, much to her disbelief. She is left speechless, stunned by the sheer arrogance of his claim. Daoden's attention suddenly shifts as he barks, "Hey dumbass," at Zeon, who can only muster a feeble correction. Zeon is utterly dumbfounded when his master declares that he, a mere E-rank, will be the one to fight off the invaders. However, he protests the impossible assignment, but Daoden demands that he earn the expensive gauntlet he was just given by defeating the D-rank leader. Still processing the absurd command, our protagonist can only stare in disbelief. Leaning in close, the old swordsman taunts his apprentice, pointedly asking if he's scared to face the challenge. The taunt hits its mark, causing Zeon to flinch as the weight of the challenge and the insult sinks in. Now, standing alone, he prepares to face the oncoming horde. Cursing under his breath, he's furious with himself for being so easily provoked. He reflects on his master's sharp wit, acknowledging that the taunt was a calculated move to push him into this fight. Shaking off his anger, he focuses and gathers his power, reminding himself he has no time for distractions. With the enemy horde closing in, he calculates he has just 5 minutes to formulate a plan. Clenching his new subspace gauntlet, he focuses on the critical question: how to defeat an Awakener, who's ranked higher than him. From a safe vantage point, a concerned Pavilsa asks Daoden if he's sure about leaving the boy to fight alone, and voices his doubt, pointing out the massive power gap and reminding his friend that Zeon is merely an E-rank. Daoden's response is brutally simple: if the kid loses, he dies, and that's the end of it. Pavilsa sighs at his friend's extremism, warning that potential means nothing if a tiger cub is killed by dogs before it can grow. However, his tone shifts as he considers the alternative. What if this trial forces the cub to finally bare its fangs? Deciding to offer some wisdom, Pavilsa cups his hands and yells down to get the young man's attention. While Daoden watches with smug amusement, he shouts one crucial piece of advice for him to remember. Down below, Zeon clenches his fist, taking in the old man's impactful words from above. The Black Shark clan finally arrives, and a woman named Klang asks her captain, Gawain, if she should select prisoners to sell off. Her captain furiously rejects the idea, ordering his clan to forego prisoners and simply hack off everyone's limbs to feed to the Arslan. With a battle cry of, "Let's go," Klang and the other core members lead the charge. A clan member screams for his comrades to carve their infamous name into the souls of their victims. The scavengers swarm the base of the giant turtle, gleefully shouting that it's festival time as they prepare for the slaughter. Suddenly, the attack is disrupted as Gawain leaps into the air, and his mount is violently stuck in the sand by an eruption of sand. And he can only watch in disbelief, screaming as the very ground beneath his forces turns against them. As the battlefield transforms into a chaotic death trap of splitting sand, he frantically orders his men to retreat. But the order comes too late, as the rank-and-file members of his clan are consumed by the sand. The surviving core members regroup, and Klang asks a stunned Gawain if he's alright after the unexpected attack. He immediately suspects a trap, but she vehemently denies it, confirming the area was clear just moments before. Just as she theorizes that one of their enemies might be responsible, she is suddenly seized from behind by an unseen assailant. She turns in shock to see Zeon, his eyes glowing with cold power, having appeared behind her in an instant. Enraged, her captain screams at Zeon to release his subordinate. Ignoring the threat, Zeon pierces her with a spike of sand. The captain's eyes widen in shock when he witnesses the brutal death of his comrade. After that, the girl's body collapses to the ground. Meanwhile, Zeon, having already dealt with her, wipes blood from his cheek and coldly announces, "Next." Another core member, a swordsman named Masamoto, materializes behind him, his katana glowing with red energy as he prepares a killing blow. The swordsman unleashes a powerful, mana-infused slash aimed directly at Zeon's back. The attack connects, creating a massive shockwave as it appears to tear right through him. However, Masimoto is left stunned by the result, questioning what just happened. He realizes with disbelief that his powerful slash wasn't dodged but was somehow blocked. Suddenly, Gawain cries out Masimoto's name in warning, and warns him of the sand spikes erupting from the ground below. Masimoto then dives from the air, aiming a powerful downward slash to block the spikes. But just then, the captain accuses him of using cheap tricks. He then attacks from behind. However, his hand gets stuck in the sand, and he finally realizes the nature of his opponent's power, exclaiming, "Sand?" His shock turns to rage as he dismisses the ability as nothing more than petty tricks and pathetic crap. Powering up his fist with red energy, he bellows that such a pathetic ability could never stop him. Just then, he shouts to his comrade Masimoto, calling for a pincer attack to overwhelm Zeon. But to his shock, Masimoto is already pierced by our guy with his own sword. With glowing eyes, our guy now turns his attention to the captain. Zeon then recalls Pavilsa's earlier shout, remembering the crucial advice he was given. He remembers the old man correctly guessing his greatest hesitation, not the enemy's power, but the act of killing another human. And that crucial piece of advice resounds in his mind: those bastards aren't human. As Zeon had questioned the statement, Pavilsa's voice had confirmed it with absolute certainty. Pavilsa's voice detailed their cruelty, explaining that they are monsters who torture and kill purely for enjoyment. He continued, listing their heinous crimes, taking pride in violating women and butchering children, and asked if such creatures. Back in the present, Zeon steps firmly into a pool of fresh blood, his hesitation gone. Can truly be called human? With those words echoing in his mind, he finds a new, chilling resolve. Gawain, completely enraged by the loss of his men, charges forward with pure killing intent. However, our guy calmly unleashes a barrage of hardened sand bullets to intercept the furious scavenger leader. Still screaming about cheap tricks, Gawain summons a protective barrier to block the volley of projectiles, and furiously demands to know if Zeon really thinks this bullshit is enough to defeat him. He then screams a series of vile threats, promising to dismember Zeon slowly and feed his remains to monsters. As he continues his sadistic monologue, promising to make his opponent beg for death, he is cut off by a calm, simple, "Hey." Having drawn his new sword, Zeon stands ready and asks the enraged scavenger, "Are those your last words?" The sheer audacity of the question makes Gawain's eye twitch with uncontrollable rage. Watching from the ramparts, Daoden breaks into a wide, satisfied grin, pleased with his student's development. Down on the battlefield, Zeon tightens his grip on his sword, his voice low and steady. With cold, empty eyes, he delivers his final verdict on his opponent: piece of trash. Enraged at being called trash, Gawain remembers his fallen comrade, Clang, who was brutally killed by Zeon. Then, the memory of another loyal subordinate, Masimoto, flashes before his eyes. And he declares that the people he acknowledged wouldn't be defeated by a mere amateur. Just then he stares down his opponent, who stands cloaked in a whirlwind of sand, and wonders just what kind of man he's facing. As Zeon manifests a colossal sand dragon, he is left stunned, questioning the very nature of his opponent's ability. In response, Gawain channels his own martial energy, his fists glowing with a menacing red aura. Tired of the games, he challenges Zeon to drop the tricks and reveal the true ability hidden in the sand. Zeon, however, prepares an attack of his own, surrounded by deadly sand spikes. Losing his patience, Gawain roars for him to stop hiding and face him directly. He then unleashes a massive, swirling vortex of energy to blow away the surrounding sand. As the attack continues to rage, he relentlessly presses on, demanding to see what's next. His red eyes burn with fury while he scans the sandstorm for any sign of his opponent. Suddenly, the sandstorm dissipates, and he is shocked to find that Zeon has completely vanished. While searching frantically, he is caught completely off guard as a sand blade appears right at his shoulder. Zeon lands a powerful blow from behind, shattering his defenses. However, our protagonist is surprised to find his attack blocked, realizing Gawain had predicted the move. Gawain reveals his trap, declaring that Zeon has finally entered his attack range and was lured in. In a flash, he closes the distance and slams the boy into the ground with overwhelming force. Even he mockingly compliments his opponent, surprised that a non-martial type could bridge the distance so easily. Pinned and overpowered, Zeon can only grit his teeth in frustration. Gawain lectures him, stating that he clearly doesn't understand the fundamentals of a real battle. Declaring that a single mistake means death, our guy realizes it was just a trick. Now on the offensive, Gawain promises to carve into his opponent, starting with a blow for Masimoto. And so, he unleashes a shockwave of red energy, pummeling Zeon from every direction. The ground itself erupts under the force of his relentless assault. With each blow, he screams the names of his fallen clan members, fighting for Clang and Alaya. His vengeful cries continue, shouting the name Ezreal into the desert wind. Zeon is brutally beaten as the clan leader continues to list the names of his dead comrades, Miraz, Shivaria, and Kyle. He then sneers that whatever Zeon's ability is, it means nothing now that he's cornered. Telling him to curse his own weakness, he delivers a powerful punch. But to his utter shock, his fist passes through nothing but sand, leaving him to wonder how he missed. Just then, Zeon appears beside him, rising from beneath the sand in a vortex, and takes hold of his hand. Confused, Gawain realizes that Zeon has slipped off his gauntlet to escape. Zeon then unleashes a barrage of sand spikes, controlling the sand with precision. Gawain calls him a damn rat as the sand spike strikes him, sending him skidding backward onto his heel. Our guy continues his relentless assault. Gawain curses himself for the blunder, admitting that he panicked and let his opponent slip away. However, he notices that the power behind his attack has noticeably weakened because of the wound he has inflicted on his opponent. Seeing that our guy lacks the momentum he had before, he quickly deduces that the amplification of his power must have been coming from the gauntlet. Still misidentifying the ability, he theorizes that his opponent is a rare wind type who is using sand to add physical force. Now confident he's figured it all out, Gawain charges in for the kill. He boasts that without the gauntlet, the boy is stripped of his power and stands no chance. And he scoffs at the very idea that a magic type without an amplifier could ever defeat a martial type in close combat. But suddenly, he is stabbed from behind by the sand spikes. At this, he is shocked to realize that Xion was aiming for his back. With a sinister grin, Xion recalls his master's lessons, knowing that this moment has finally arrived. He then reveals his true plan, announcing that his opponent has finally let his guard down. Pierced, Gawain can't believe Xion used the same trick again. A horrifying realization dawns on him: Xion is using this immense power without his gauntlet. His mind races, unable to comprehend how a magic user could put so much force behind sand. He knows it should be impossible to wield such power without an item to amplify one's ability. As more sand spikes pierce his body, the terrifying truth about Xion's power begins to sink in. In his final moments, he struggles with the concept of a power that can truly manipulate sand. So he finally understands that his opponent's ability isn't just magic, it's a power that controls the world itself. As he is completely consumed by the sand, his last thought a question of whether such a power could even exist. As the dust settles, Xion stands victorious over the remains of the Black Shark clan's leader. Watching from the fortress, Pavilsa is left in absolute shock, whispering about the impossible ability to manipulate sand, and realizes with dawning horror that if the boy controls the sand, then the entire world is his weapon and shield. Even he exclaims that he can't believe what he's seeing with his own two eyes. After that, he calmly analyzes the fight, noting that if Xion had fought the experienced Gawain head-on, he would have been at risk. So that the boy cleverly exploited the irregular nature of his ability to lull his opponent into carelessness, and observes that Xion grasped a level of battle judgment that takes years of experience to learn, and did so instinctively. He then marvels at the fact that the boy learned this crucial lesson in the heat of a life-or-death battle, and mutters to himself, admitting he was wrong to think of the boy as a mere tiger cub. Turning to his old friend, he asks Diodon where on earth he managed to find such a monster.